She didn't run to a quiet park. She crashed into it, bleeding, shaking, convinced she'd finally escaped hell, until she saw him, a stranger carved from shadows, staring at her bruises like they were a declaration of war. She thought she'd found silence. She had no idea she'd just stepped into a mafia boss's line of sight, and he'd already decided what happens next. If you're hooked in and want to enjoy this story, go ahead and subscribe, and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. It's always amazing to see where everyone's watching. Plus, tomorrow I've got another incredible story lined up, and you definitely don't want to miss it. Alright, back to the story. Julie Blair had learned to count in new ways since becoming Mrs. Dominic Blair. Not minutes or hours, not days on a calendar or dollars in a bank account she couldn't access. She counted in bruises. In apologies she didn't mean. In seconds between the sound of his car in the driveway and the moment his key turned in the lock, those precious seconds that told her what kind of night it would be. Tonight had been a 7-second night. 7 seconds between the Mercedes door slamming and his entrance. Not enough time for the engine to cool. Not enough time for rage to settle. She had been in the kitchen when he found her, wiping down counters that were already clean because stillness felt like guilt in this house. He'd walked in with his tie loosened and his jaw tight, the combination that meant someone had said no to him today. Someone had made Dominic Blair feel small, and small men made themselves big again by breaking smaller things. "You embarrassed me," he'd said, voice soft as a knife sliding from its sheath. She hadn't been anywhere, hadn't done anything. But facts didn't matter in the physics of his anger. "The Hendersons mentioned you didn't attend the luncheon today. You made me look like a man who can't control his own wife." Control. That word was his religion. "I wasn't feeling well, His hand had moved faster than her apology. The crack of his palm against her cheek had rung out like a starting gun. What came after was a blur of kitchen tile and cabinet corners and his voice reciting all the ways she'd failed him. All the ways she owed him. All the things he'd saved her from poverty, obscurity, the meaningless little life she'd been living. When it was over, he'd straightened his tie, poured himself scotch, and told her to clean herself up. They had a breakfast meeting with investors at 8. That's when Julie saw it. In his eyes, as he walked away. Not rage anymore. Not even satisfaction. Finality. The look of a man who decided that something broken wasn't worth fixing anymore. She'd waited until his breathing deepened in sleep. Until the scotch and the violence and the certainty that she'd still be there in the morning pulled him under. Then she'd moved. The backpack had been hidden inside the box for her wedding dress, the dress she'd worn 3 years ago when she still believed in rescue. Inside were clothes, cash, her mother's photograph, and a passport Dominic didn't know she'd renewed. She'd prepared for this moment in tiny increments. $1 here, a lie there, watching him enter the security code until her fingers memorized the rhythm. 6 beeps, pause, 2 beeps. The front door had opened like an exhale. She'd walked out of her prison in sneakers that didn't make sound and a hoodie that swallowed her frame. Walked past the fountain where Dominic proposed. Past the gate with the Blair family crest. Past the cameras she'd learned the blind spots of months ago. She'd walked for 30 minutes before her knees started shaking. 45 before the adrenaline began to crack. An hour before she admitted she had nowhere to go. No family, they were gone. No friends, Dominic had made sure of that, isolating her with the precision of a surgeon. No money beyond what was in her bag, enough for maybe a week if she was careful. The park had appeared through the fog like a gift, or a trap. Julie was too tired to tell the difference. She'd stumbled past the iron gates and into a landscape of empty benches and dying street lamps. The fog was thick enough to taste metallic and damp, like the city was sweating. Her body had given out near a bench, half hidden by shadow. She'd collapsed onto the weathered wood, pressing her hands to her face, trying to hold herself together through sheer force of will. That's when she'd felt it, the weight of being watched. Julie had lifted her head slowly, pulse spiking, and turned. He sat 3 feet away, perfectly still. A man carved from night itself, black leather, dark ink crawling up his neck. A face that looked like it had forgotten how to smile. He wasn't looking at the park or the fog or the distant city lights. He was looking at her, not the way men usually looked at her, with hunger or pity or polite disinterest. He looked at her the way a wolf looks at wounded prey, assessing, calculating, deciding. Julie's breath stuttered. She should run, should scream, should do anything except sit here bleeding and broken in front of a stranger who radiated danger like heat. But exhaustion had stripped her of survival instincts, so she just stared back. The man's gaze dropped slowly to her throat, to the bruises she'd forgotten were visible, to the split lip and the blood dried on her chin. She watched something transform in his expression, something cold sliding into something colder, something that looked like controlled fury wrapped in lethal calm. When he finally spoke, his accent was Italian, smooth and dark as espresso. "Who did this to you?" 4 words, a question that sounded like a promise. Julie opened her mouth to answer, but before she could speak, headlights cut through the fog at the park's entrance. A black SUV, moving slowly, searching. Dominic's men. The stranger's hand shot out, gripping her wrist with surprising gentleness. "Come with me," he said quietly. "Now." And Julie Blair, who had just escaped one dangerous man, made a choice that would change everything. She ran toward another. Julie's legs barely worked. The stranger, whoever he was, moved through the fog like he owned it, his grip on her wrist firm but not crushing. Not the way Dominic grabbed her. This was different. This was pull, not control. Behind them, the SUV's headlights swept across empty benches and skeletal trees. "Hunting. Keep your head down," the man said, his voice low and even. Not panicked, not rushed, like being chased through a fog-soaked park at midnight was just another Tuesday for him. That should have terrified her. Instead, Julie found herself trusting the cadence of his footsteps, the certainty in his movements. He led her off the main path, through a break in the hedge she hadn't noticed, down a slope slick with dew and decomposing leaves. Her ankle twisted. She gasped, stumbled. His arm was around her waist before she hit the ground. "I've got you," he murmured. "Stay quiet." Above them, car doors opened. Voices carried through the fog low. Male, aggressive. "She came this way. Has to be close. Dominic wants her back tonight. Alive." He was very specific about alive. Julie pressed her hand to her mouth, stifling the sob that wanted to escape. They were here. They'd found her. Less than 2 hours of freedom, and the stranger's hand moved to the back of her head, gently guiding her face against his chest. His other arm wrapped around her shoulders, shielding her completely. She could hear his heartbeat, slow, steady, unnaturally calm. "Don't move," he whispered into her hair. "Don't breathe loud. Let me handle this." Footsteps crunched on gravel above them. A flashlight beam cut through the fog, sweeping left, then right. "Check the benches again." "Already did." "She's not." Then she left the park. "Fan out. Check the streets." The voices faded. Car doors slammed. The SUV's engine growled back to life, headlights retreating like predator eyes closing. Julie didn't realize she was shaking until the stranger pulled back slightly, his hands moving to her shoulders. "They're gone," he said quietly. "For now." She looked up at him. In the weak moonlight filtering through the fog, his face was all angles and shadows. The tattoos on his neck seemed to move in the darkness, serpents and script and symbols that promised violence. "Who are you?" she whispered. He studied her for a long moment. Then, instead of answering, he shrugged out of his leather jacket and draped it over her shoulders. It was still warm from his body, smelling of cigarettes and expensive cologne, and something darker she couldn't name. "Someone who knows what running looks like," he said. "And you're not going to survive the night alone." I can't," Julie's voice cracked. "I don't have anywhere to go." "I know. I don't have money for a hotel or—" "I know. I don't even know where I am right now." "Julie," her name in his mouth stopped her cold. She hadn't told him her name. He saw her panic and his expression softened barely, like stone learning to bend. "Your face is on every security alert in the city by now," he said. "Dominic Blair's missing wife. I'd bet my life he's got half the LAPD looking for you, and the other half on his payroll." "How do you know Dominic?" Something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "I know men like him. Men who think money makes them untouchable. Men who believe everything, including people, belongs to them." He turned, scanning the darkness beyond the hedge. "We need to move. They'll loop back." "Where?" "Somewhere safe." "Safe?" Julie laughed bitterly, the sound foreign in her own throat. "I don't think that place exists." The stranger looked at her, then really looked, and she saw something shift behind his eyes, something that might have been recognition, or memory, or pain he'd learned to carry without flinching. "It does," he said quietly. "But you have to trust me. Trust." The word felt like a language she'd forgotten how to speak. This man was a stranger. Tattooed and dangerous and too calm in the face of violence. Everything about him screamed threat. But Dominic's men were out there, and Dominic himself would be awake by now, realizing she was gone, unleashing everything he had to drag her back. Back to that house, that bathroom floor, that look in his eyes that promised she wouldn't survive the next time. Julie pulled his jacket tighter around herself and made a decision that defied every logical bone in her body. "Okay," she whispered. The stranger nodded once. Then he took her hand gently, like she was something fragile he was afraid to break, and led her deeper into the darkness. They walked in silence for 10 minutes, maybe 15. Julie lost track. The fog swallowed landmarks. Street signs became ghosts. The city dissolved into nothing but the sound of their footsteps and her ragged breathing. Finally, they emerged onto a side street where a black car sat waiting. Sleek, expensive, engine already running. A driver stepped out, opened the back door without a word. The stranger gestured for her to enter. When she hesitated, he leaned close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. "I'm not going to hurt you, Julie," he said softly. "But the men hunting you will. So please, get in the car." She looked at the open door, then at him, then at the fog-choked park behind them where Dominic's wolves were circling. Julie Blair climbed into the car, and the stranger who hadn't told her his name slid in beside her, closing the door on the world she'd barely escaped. The car moved through Los Angeles like a shadow, taking turns Julie didn't recognize, traveling through neighborhoods where streetlights flickered or didn't exist at all. She sat rigid in the leather seat, hyper-aware of the stranger beside her. He hadn't spoken since they'd left the park, just stared out the window with the stillness of someone accustomed to silence. The driver, a broad-shouldered man with silver threading through his dark hair, hadn't asked questions, hadn't even looked at her in the rearview mirror. Like bleeding women climbing into cars at midnight was routine. Maybe for them, it was. "Where are we going?" Julie finally asked, her voice smaller than she intended. "Somewhere Dominic Blair's money can't reach," the stranger said without turning from the window. "That place doesn't exist. He owns half this city." Now the stranger looked at her. "He owns half. I own parts he doesn't know exist." The certainty in his voice should have comforted her. Instead, it raised new questions. Dangerous questions about what kind of man had those kinds of resources, that kind of confidence. 20 minutes later, the car pulled into an underground garage beneath a building with no visible signage. The entrance had required a key card. The elevator required a fingerprint scanner. Julie's pulse hammered as they ascended in silence. When the doors opened, she stepped into a penthouse that looked nothing like Dominic's showpiece prison. This was all dark wood and steel, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, minimalist furniture that seemed designed for function rather than display. It felt lived in, real, like someone actually existed here instead of performing existence. "Sit," the stranger said, gesturing to a leather couch. "I'll get you water." "I don't want water. I want answers." Julie heard the tremor in her voice and hated it. "Who are you? Why are you helping me? What do you want?" He paused halfway to the kitchen, his back still to her. "My name is Armando. Just Armando. No last name. Like he was a brand or a warning. And what I want," he continued, turning to face her, "is to make sure you survive the night. Everything else can wait. Nothing is free," Julie said, channeling 3 years of Dominic's lessons. "Everyone wants something." Armando's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "Respect, maybe? Or recognition?" "You're right," he said quietly. "But what I want isn't something you can give me. So for tonight, just accept that you're safe here." Before Julie could respond, her knees buckled. The adrenaline that had carried her through the escape, through the park, through the car ride, it all evaporated at once. Armando crossed the room in 3 strides, catching her before she hit the floor. "Easy," he murmured, lowering her onto the couch. "When's the last time you ate?" Julie couldn't remember. Yesterday? The day before? Dominic controlled mealtimes like he controlled everything else. "I'll make food," Armando said, but his eyes had caught on something. The way her hoodie had shifted, revealing the bruises that ringed her throat like a necklace. His jaw tightened. That cold fury she'd seen in the park returned, but controlled, leashed. "First, you need medical attention." "No hospitals," Julie said quickly. "He'll find me. He has people everywhere, doctors, nurses, administrators. He'll know the second I wasn't going to take you to a hospital." Armando pulled out his phone, typed something, then pocketed it. "Someone I trust is coming. A doctor. Discreet." "You have a doctor who makes house calls at 2 in the morning? "I have a doctor who doesn't ask questions." Julie wanted to ask what kind of life required that, but exhaustion was pulling her under. She leaned back against the couch, Armando's jacket still wrapped around her shoulders, and closed her eyes. Just for a moment, just to rest. She woke screaming. In the dream, Dominic had found her. In the dream, his hands were around her throat again, squeezing, and his voice was in her ear. "You're mine. You'll always be mine. Death is the only divorce I grant." Strong hands gripped her shoulders. A voice cut through the nightmare, firm but gentle. "Julie, Julie, you're safe. You're not there. You're here. You're safe." Her eyes snapped open. Armando knelt in front of the couch, his hands on her shoulders but not restraining, just anchoring. Behind him, an older woman with kind eyes and a medical bag stood waiting. "You were dreaming," Armando said quietly. "Just dreaming." Julie's cheeks were wet. She was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. "He was here. He found me. He's not here. And he won't be." Armando's voice dropped into something darker. "I promise you that." The woman stepped forward. "I'm Dr. Reyes. May I examine you?" Julie nodded, unable to speak. The examination was gentle but thorough. Dr. Reyes cataloged injuries with clinical precision, but human empathy, the bruises, the split lip, the tender ribs, the sprained wrist, Julie hadn't even noticed. "No fractures," Dr. Reyes said finally, "but you'll be sore for weeks. I'm leaving pain medication and antibiotics. Ice the bruises. Rest. And..." She glanced at Armando, then back to Julie. "Consider speaking to someone about what you've been through." After the doctor left, Julie sat in silence, staring at the pill bottles on the coffee table. Armando settled into the chair across from her, maintaining distance, giving her space. "Why?" Julie whispered finally. "Why are you helping me?" Armando was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Because no woman deserves to be hunted." Something in his voice, a rawness, a wound, made Julie look up. "That's not the whole answer," she said softly. Armando met her gaze, and for the first time, she saw past the controlled exterior to the grief underneath. "No," he agreed. "It's not." Julie woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the smell of coffee. For 3 perfect seconds, she forgot where she was, forgot what she'd run from, forgot the bruises mapped across her skin like evidence. Then her body remembered. Her throat ached. Her ribs protested when she breathed. Reality crashed back with the weight of a collapsing building. She was in Armando's penthouse, in his guest room, in clothes she didn't remember changing into soft cotton pants and an oversized shirt that smelled like expensive detergent. He must have moved her while she slept. The thought should have alarmed her, but somehow it didn't. Julie found him in the kitchen, standing at the counter with a tablet in one hand and an espresso cup in the other. He'd changed from last night's leather into dark jeans and a black Henley that revealed more of the tattoos covering his arms, intricate, purposeful, telling stories in ink she couldn't read. He looked up when she entered. "You should still be sleeping." "Couldn't." Julie wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware of how exposed she felt in borrowed clothes, in this stranger's home, in a life she didn't understand. "What time is it?" "Almost noon." She'd slept for 10 hours. 10 hours without nightmares pulling her awake, without Dominic's voice in her ear, without fear pressing her into the mattress like a weight. "Coffee?" Armando asked, already reaching for a cup. "Please." He poured without asking how she took it, adding cream and 1 sugar exactly right. The observation unsettled her until she realized he'd probably noticed last night, filing away details the way careful people do, the way dangerous people do. Julie accepted the cup, cradling it like warmth could transfer through ceramic into the cold places inside her. "I should go." "Where?" The question hung in the air between them, unanswerable. "I don't know," she admitted. "But I can't stay here. I've already put you in danger just by..." "Julie." Armando set down his espresso with deliberate care. "Look at me." She did. "Dominic Blair doesn't scare me. He should. He has money, connections, lawyers who can. I know exactly what he has." Armando's voice was soft but edged with something sharp. "I had my people pull his files last night." "Your people?" Instead of answering, Armando picked up the tablet and turned it toward her. The screen displayed documents, financial records, property deeds, photographs, emails. "Dominic Blair," Armando read quietly. 42. CEO of Blair Holdings, a real estate development company with projects in 8 states. Net worth approximately $300 million. Inherited the company from his father, expanded aggressively through ventures that often involved, he paused, eyes darkening, creative accounting and political contributions that looked suspiciously like bribes. Julie's hands trembled around the coffee cup. "How did you..." "He's also been investigated twice for fraud. Cases dropped both times due to lack of evidence, and I suspect generous payments to the right people." Armando swiped to another document. 3 former employees filed restraining orders. 2 withdrew the complaints. One left the country. The room tilted. Julie set down her coffee before she dropped it. The woman who left the country, she whispered. Was her name Rebecca? Armando's expression confirmed it before he spoke. Rebecca Chen, former personal assistant, filed a restraining order 18 months before you married him. Julie closed her eyes. She'd heard Dominic mention Rebecca once, calling her unstable, claiming she'd tried to extort him. Julie had believed him then. Believed his wounded confusion, his indignation. God, she'd been so stupid. There's more, Armando said, and his voice had gone soft in a way that made her stomach drop. But I need you to tell me something first. Julie opened her eyes. Has he ever? Armando stopped, jaw working, choosing words. Has he hurt you in ways that don't leave visible marks? The question cracked something open inside her. Something she'd kept locked and sealed and buried so deep she'd almost convinced herself it didn't exist. Yes, she whispered. Armando's hands curled into fists on the counter. He took a careful breath, then another, like he was counting himself back from an edge. Tell me, he said quietly. All of it. Every detail you can remember. Why? Because men like Dominic operate on secrets, on shame, on the silence of the people they hurt. Armando looked at her, and she saw something in his eyes that looked like personal understanding, like ancient pain. I'm going to take those secrets and turn them into weapons, but I need you to trust me enough to speak them out loud. Trust. That word again. Julie had trusted Dominic when he promised to take care of her. Trusted him when he said he loved her. Trusted him when he swore each time was the last time. But Armando wasn't asking her to trust his promises. He was asking her to trust her own voice. So Julie sat at his counter, in his borrowed clothes, in the sunlight that made her bruises visible, and began to speak. She told him about the first time Dominic hit her 6 months into their marriage, when she'd laughed too loudly at another man's joke, about the gaslighting that followed, convincing her she'd provoked him, about the escalating violence disguised as discipline, about the isolation, the financial control, the way he made her feel like she was disappearing one piece at a time. Armando listened without interrupting, didn't flinch, didn't look away, just absorbed every word like he was memorizing evidence. When she finally stopped, her throat raw from speaking truths she'd never said aloud, he asked one more question. What's your full name? Julie Ann Blair. No. His voice was gentle but firm. What was your name before him? She hadn't heard it in 3 years. Julie Ann Morrison. Julie Morrison. Armando said it like he was returning something stolen. That's who you are. Not his wife, not his property. You. And Julie Morrison, not Blair, started to cry. Dominic's face appeared on every screen. Julie stood frozen in Armando's living room 3 days later, watching her husband's press conference play out across the wall-mounted television. He looked perfect tailored navy suit, grief etched into his handsome features, voice breaking at precisely calibrated moments. My wife Julie has been missing for 72 hours, Dominic said, staring directly into the camera with eyes that had once made her feel loved. She's been struggling with mental health issues for some time. Depression, anxiety. I've been trying to get her help, but he paused, pressing fingers to his eyes like the pain was too much. I'm worried she might harm herself. If anyone has seen her, please, I'm begging you, call the number on your screen. Julie, if you're watching this, please come home. I love you. We can work through this together. The remote control shattered in Julie's hand. She hadn't realized she'd been squeezing it until plastic shards bit into her palm, until Armando was there, carefully extracting the pieces, examining the small cuts blooming red against her skin. He's lying, she whispered. Every word. I know. Armando's voice was calm, but his eyes were fixed on the screen with an intensity that looked like violence held on a leash. People will believe him. They always believe him. He's Dominic Blair, philanthropist, businessman, pillar of the community. And I'm just, her voice cracked, I'm nobody. I have no proof, no witnesses, nothing. You have me. Julie looked up at him. You don't understand. He has lawyers who can make anything disappear. He has friends in the police department, in City Hall, in... Julie. Armando turned her gently to face him. Do you know what my last name is? She shook her head. Caputo. Armando Caputo. The name meant nothing to her for 3 seconds. Then memory stirred. News articles half remembered. Whispered conversations at Dominic's dinner parties. Warnings about certain families in certain neighborhoods. The Caputo family. Italian Mafia. Organized crime spanning 3 countries. Julie's breath caught. Yes. No apology, No justification, just confirmation. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have gotten in the car if I had? No. She wouldn't have. She would have run from him the same way she ran from Dominic. I've spent 3 days in the home of a mafia boss, Julie said slowly. You've spent 3 days safe. Armando released her hands, stepping back to give her space. But if you want to leave, I won't stop you. The door isn't locked. It never has been. Julie looked at the door, then at the television, where Dominic's face still filled the screen, performing grief for an audience that would never see the monster behind the mask. She thought about the safe house Rebecca Chen had probably never found, about the restraining orders that got withdrawn, about all the women who'd tried to escape Dominic Blair and failed. If I leave, she whispered, he'll find me in a week, maybe less, probably. And if I stay? Armando's expression hardened into something that looked like a promise carved in stone. Then I make sure he never touches you again. The retaliation came faster than Julie expected. By nightfall, Armando's phone was ringing constantly. He took calls in Italian, in English, in languages Julie didn't recognize, his voice never rising, never rushed, just giving orders with the efficiency of someone accustomed to command. What's happening? She asked when he finally set the phone down. Dominic is using every resource he has to find you. Police doing welfare checks on buildings I own. Private investigators following my known associates. He's even offering a reward $50,000 for information leading to your recovery. Julie's stomach turned. He'll find me. No. Armando crossed to the window, looking out at the city spread below them like a kingdom of lights. He's looking for a frightened woman running alone. He's not looking for someone protected by an organization he can't touch. He's not afraid of you. He should be. Armando turned, and Julie saw something dark and absolute in his expression. Because, while he's been performing for cameras, I've been dismantling his empire. He pulled up files on his tablet documents that made Julie's head spin. Bank records showing offshore accounts, emails discussing bribed building inspectors, photographs of Dominic with women who weren't his wife, communications with a city councilman about falsified environmental reports. How did you get all of this? I have resources Dominic can't imagine. People who are very good at finding what others try to hide. Armando's voice was soft but edged with something lethal. Your husband has been operating above the law for years because money bought him protection. But money means nothing when the people you've bribed are more afraid of me than they are loyal to you. What are you going to do with it? Whatever you want me to do. Julie stared at the evidence spread across the screen. Years of corruption. Years of Dominic hurting people and buying his way out of consequences. I want him exposed, she said quietly. I want everyone to see what he really is. Armando nodded slowly. Then that's what we'll do. But Julie, once we start this, he'll come for you with everything he has. Not to rescue you. To silence you. Let him come. Julie's voice was steadier than she expected. I'm done being silent. Something that might have been pride flickered in Armando's eyes. Then tomorrow, we go to war. That night, Julie couldn't sleep. She stood at the guest room window, watching the city breathe below, thinking about the choice she'd made. Partner with a criminal to expose a monster. The irony wasn't lost on her. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Armando stood in the doorway, backlit by the hallway light. Can't sleep either? He asked. Too much in my head. He was quiet for a moment. Then, my sister's name was Bianca. Julie turned. Was? She married a man like Dominic. Rich, charming, respected. Armando's voice was carefully controlled. By the time we realized what he was doing to her, it was too late. She died in what the police called an accident. A fall down the stairs. Armando, I couldn't save her. He met Julie's eyes. But I can save you. So when you wonder why I'm doing this, that's why. Because I failed once. I won't fail again. Understanding settled over Julie like dawn. This wasn't just about her. This was about every woman who'd ever been hurt by men who believed love meant ownership. Thank you, she whispered. Armando nodded once and turned to leave. Armando. He paused. I'm not your sister. I'm not your second chance or your redemption. Julie's voice was gentle but firm. I'm just someone who needs help. And I'm grateful. But you don't owe me salvation because of her. Armando studied her for a long moment. Then something that might have been a smile touched his lips. Get some rest, Julie Morrison. Tomorrow changes everything. The Grand Pacifica Hotel glittered like a temple to wealth and power. Julie stood across the street, staring at the banner stretched across the entrance. Blair Holdings' annual charity gala. Building futures, changing lives. The irony tasted like acid. You don't have to do this, Armando said beside her. He'd traded his usual black for a tailored suit that transformed him from street danger into boardroom power. The tattoos were hidden. The threat wasn't. "Yes, I do." Julie smoothed down the deep burgundy dress Armando had arranged for her, elegant, expensive, the kind of armor Dominic had once dressed her in to parade at events like this. But tonight, she wasn't decoration. Tonight, she was a reckoning. 2 of Armando's men flanked them, discreet but unmistakable. A third was already inside, along with a journalist from the Los Angeles Times who'd been promised the story of the year. "Dominic will see you the moment you walk in," Armando warned. "Good." Julie's voice was steadier than her hands. "Let him see me." They crossed the street together, climbing the steps where valets rushed to assist guests arriving in vehicles that cost more than most people's homes. Julie had attended this gala twice before, once as Dominic's fiancée, once as his wife. Both times, she'd smiled until her face hurt and said nothing of consequence. Not tonight. The ballroom was exactly as she remembered. Crystal chandeliers, ice sculptures, tables dressed in white and gold. Los Angeles' elite mingled with champagne flutes and practiced laughter, playing the game of influence and access. Julie spotted Dominic immediately. He stood near the stage with the mayor and a cluster of investors, looking every inch the grieving husband bravely soldiering through tragedy. His eyes were shadowed like he hadn't slept. His smile was subdued, appropriately somber. Then he saw her. The champagne flute in his hand stopped halfway to his lips. His face went through a cascade of emotions in 3 seconds. Shock, relief, rage, calculation, before settling on concerned joy. "Julie." His voice carried across the ballroom, perfectly pitched for maximum attention. "Oh my God, Julie." Conversation stopped. Heads turned. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. Dominic rushed toward her, arms outstretched like he was about to embrace his lost love. "Thank God you're safe. I've been out of my mind with worry." "Don't touch me." Julie's voice cut through his performance like glass. Dominic stopped, hurt flooding his features. "Sweetheart, I know you've been confused, but you're sick. You need help. Let me take you home so we can—" "I'm not sick, Dominic, and I'm not going anywhere with you." Whispers rippled through the crowd. Phones appeared, recording. This was better than the scripted entertainment. This was real drama unfolding among people who usually hid their scandals behind closed doors and NDAs. "Julie, please." Dominic's voice dropped into that familiar tone, the one that used to make her doubt her own sanity. "You're not thinking clearly," the doctors said. "What doctors?" Julie stepped forward, and Armando moved with her like a shadow. "The ones you never took me to? The mental health crisis you invented for the cameras? I was trying to protect you. To protect us." Dominic's eyes cut to Armando, assessment and recognition flashing across his face. "Who is this? Is he the one who's been keeping you from coming home? Manipulating you?" "His name is Armando Caputo," Julie said clearly. "And he's the reason I'm still alive." The name landed like a grenade. Julie watched understanding dawn on faces throughout the room. The Caputo family wasn't unknown to people who operated in Los Angeles' power structures. Dominic's mask slipped for just a second. "You're with the Mafia? Julie, do you understand what kind of danger?" "I understand danger perfectly." Julie's voice rose, fueled by 3 years of silence. "I lived with it every single day I was married to you. That's not fair. I've always— You beat me." The words echoed through the ballroom like a gunshot. "Regularly, systematically, for 3 years. And when I finally escaped, you went on television and told the world I was mentally ill." "Julie, you're confused. I have bruises that tell a different story." Armando stepped forward, tablet in hand. "Would you like to see the evidence, Mr. Blair? Or should we let the Los Angeles Times reporter standing by the bar see it first?" Every eye in the room found the journalist, who raised her phone in acknowledgement. Dominic's face transformed. The concerned husband dissolved, revealing the cold fury beneath. "You have no idea what you're doing. The consequences of—" "Show them," Julie said to Armando. The ballroom's projection screen meant for speeches about charity and community suddenly filled with documents, bank statements showing offshore accounts, emails discussing falsified building permits, photographs of Dominic with women who weren't his wife, communication with city officials that read like bribery dressed in corporate language, and then the photographs that made the room gasp, medical records from hospitals, documenting injuries attributed to falls and accidents over 3 years. Each one dated, each one showing a pattern. "This is fabricated," Dominic snarled. "Lies constructed by criminals to—" "Rebecca Chen sends her regards," Armando said quietly. "She's willing to testify. So are 2 other former employees you paid to disappear." The color drained from Dominic's face. Police officers materialized at the ballroom entrance, not the ones on Dominic's payroll, but federal agents who'd been waiting for exactly this moment. "Dominic Blair," the lead agent said, approaching with handcuffs ready. "You're under arrest for assault, fraud, bribery of public officials, and obstruction of justice." The ballroom erupted. Cameras flashed. Dominic lunged toward Julie, rage finally unveiled. Armando was there first, his hand catching Dominic's wrist with crushing force. "You don't touch her," Armando said, voice deadly soft. "Ever again." Officers pulled Dominic back, restraining him as he shouted threats and denials that no one was listening to anymore. Julie stood in the center of the chaos, trembling but upright. For the first time in 3 years, she'd told the truth. And the truth had teeth. Julie should have known it wouldn't end at the gala. Men like Dominic Blair didn't surrender to handcuffs and humiliation. They had lawyers who could argue water wasn't wet. They had judges who owed them favors. They had systems built to protect people with the right last name and the right bank balance. 48 hours after his arrest, Dominic posted bail. Julie was in Armando's kitchen when the news alert appeared on her phone. The coffee mug slipped from her fingers, shattering against the tile in an explosion of ceramic and dark liquid. Dominic Blair, released on $5 million bail pending trial. The photograph showed him leaving the courthouse in a fresh suit, flanked by attorneys who cost more per hour than most people earned in a month. His expression was calm, controlled, but Julie knew that look. She'd seen it right before the worst nights. "He's out." Her voice sounded distant, like it was coming from underwater. "Armando, he's out." Armando appeared in the doorway, phone already to his ear, speaking rapid Italian. When he ended the call, his face was carved from stone. "I know. My people are already moving." He crossed to her, careful to avoid the broken ceramic. "Julie, look at me." She couldn't. She was staring at Dominic's photograph, at the smile playing at the corners of his mouth. The smile that said, "I told you this wouldn't work. I told you you couldn't leave." "Julie." Armando's hands framed her face gently, forcing her attention to him. "He's not getting near you, I promise." "You can't promise that. He's free. He has money and connections and—" Her breath was coming too fast. Panic clawed at her throat. "He's going to kill me. That's why he's smiling. He's already planning it. Then he'll have to go through me first." The certainty in Armando's voice should have been comforting. Instead, it terrified her, because Julie had learned that certainty was just another word for hubris, and hubris got people killed. The threat started within hours. Not calls to her phone. Dominic was smarter than that. Instead, messages appeared on social media accounts Julie hadn't used in years, posts from profiles that disappeared as soon as they were reported. "You made a mistake, Julie. You can't hide forever. I'm coming for what's mine." Armando's response was immediate and military in precision. The penthouse transformed into a fortress. Security cameras multiplied. Armed men appeared at entry points, discreet but present, watching hallways and monitoring elevators. Julie felt the walls closing in. "I can't live like this," she said on the 3rd day of lockdown. "I'm in a different cage, Armando. Safer, maybe, but still trapped." He was standing at the window, watching the city like he could see threats forming in the streets below. "It's temporary, until the trial. The trial could take months, years," Julie's voice cracked. "And even if he's convicted, he'll appeal. He'll find ways to—" Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "I know where you are, Julie. I know who you're with. Did you really think a criminal could protect you from me? I'm untouchable. And you're mine. Always have been. Always will be. See you soon, D." The phone fell from her hand. Armando was there in seconds, reading the message, his expression transforming into something that looked like controlled violence. "Get your things," he said quietly. "We're moving you." "To where?" "He found this place. He'll find—" "Not where I'm taking you." 20 minutes later, Julie was in another car, watching Los Angeles disappear through tinted windows. Armando sat beside her, silent and tense, while 2 of his men occupied the front seats. They drove for over an hour, leaving the city behind, heading into hills where houses became sparse and roads turned to gravel. The safe house was hidden behind gates that required biometric scans, surrounded by property that stretched for acres. Inside, it was sparse but functional, a place designed for hiding, not living. Julie stood in the center of the main room, feeling the isolation settle over her like a burial shroud. "How long?" she asked. "As long as it takes." That's not an answer. Armando turned to face her, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked tired. I don't have better answers, Julie. Dominic is playing a game he's been winning his entire life. He knows the system. He knows how to manipulate it. Then what's the point? Julie's voice rose. 3 years of fear finally boiling over. What's the point of exposing him if he just walks free? What's the point of speaking up if he still gets to hunt me? The point is you're alive. Armando's voice was sharp. The point is you're not in that house being beaten. The point is I traded one prison for another. Julie was shouting now, all the rage and terror spilling out. At least before, I knew the rules. At least before I wasn't dragging other people into my nightmare. Your sister died because of a man like Dominic. What if you die because of me? The words hung between them like an accusation. Armando's expression shifted something raw and unguarded, breaking through his usual control. My sister died because I wasn't paying attention, he said quietly. Because I was too busy building an empire to notice she was drowning. Because by the time I understood what was happening, it was too late. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. I won't let that happen again. Not to you. Not to anyone. This isn't about redemption, Armando. This is about survival. And I don't know if either of us is going to... Her phone buzzed again. Another message. Another unknown number. Enjoy your new hiding place. The one in the hills with the blue shutters. It won't keep you safe. Nothing will. I'm done playing games, Julie. Time to come home. Below the text was a photograph. The safe house, taken from outside the gates. Taken 20 minutes ago. Julie's legs gave out. Armando caught her. His face transformed into something lethal and absolute. Get everyone inside, he barked to his men. Lock it down, now. He pulled Julie close, his voice in her ear. He wants you afraid. He wants you to believe he's everywhere. But fear makes mistakes. He found us, and now I know he's coming. Armando pulled back, meeting her eyes. Which means I can be ready. Outside, in the gathering dusk, something moved through the trees. The hunt had found them. The phone rang at midnight. Not Julie's phone. Armando's. The burner he kept for emergencies. He answered without speaking, listened for 30 seconds, then ended the call with a single word in Italian that sounded like a curse and a promise combined. Julie sat on the safe house couch, wrapped in a blanket despite the heating, unable to stop shaking since the photograph had arrived. Armando's men had swept the perimeter 3 times. Found nothing, no signs of entry, no surveillance equipment, just the photograph. Proof that Dominic could reach them anywhere. That was my contact in the police department, Armando said, pocketing the phone. Dominic's bail conditions included a GPS monitor. It stopped transmitting an hour ago. Julie's blood turned to ice. What does that mean? It means he cut it off, which means he's coming. Then we run. We leave. No. Armando's voice was absolute. No more running, Julie. Running is what he expects. Running is what keeps you afraid for the rest of your life. I'd rather be afraid and alive than brave and dead. Armando crossed to her, kneeling so they were eye level. Do you trust me? It was the same question he'd asked in the park that first night. Then, she'd had no choice. Now, she had every reason to say no. This man was Mafia, dangerous, built from violence. Trusting him was illogical. But logic hadn't kept her alive. Armando had. Yes, Julie whispered. I trust you. Then trust me when I say this ends tonight. One way or another. He stood, making another call. We're going back to where it started. The park? The park. Armando's expression was carved from granite. He'll go there. He's sentimental about power. He'll want to find you where you first escaped him, where he thinks he lost control. That's insane. We'd be walking into a trap I'm setting. Armando's eyes met hers. He thinks he's hunting you. He has no idea I've been hunting him. They left the safe house at 1 a.m. Armando driving. Julie silent in the passenger seat. 2 cars followed at a distance. Armando's men, armed and ready. The city at night looked different than it had when Julie ran. Less threatening. More like a sleeping giant that hadn't decided yet whether to wake up violent or gentle. When they pulled up near the park, Julie's hands were shaking so badly she couldn't unbuckle her seatbelt. Armando did it for her, his movements careful. You don't have to come, he said. You can stay in the car. My men will. No. Julie's voice surprised her with its strength. I need to be there. I need to see his face when he realizes I'm not afraid anymore. It was a lie. She was terrified. But terror and courage weren't opposites, they were partners, dancing together in the dark. They walked into the park hand in hand. The fog was back, thick and cold, turning street lamps into dying stars. The bench where they'd first met sat empty, wet with condensation. Julie's breath came in visible clouds. Every shadow looked like Dominic. Every sound could be footsteps. Armando's men took positions in the darkness, invisible but present, and then they waited. 5 minutes. 10. Maybe he's not. He's here, Armando said quietly. I can feel him. Julie felt it too. That electric sense of being watched, of being prey under a predator's gaze. Movement in the fog, a figure emerging from the trees. Dominic. He looked nothing like the polished businessman from the gala. His suit was wrinkled, his hair uncombed. His eyes had the wild shine of someone who'd stopped pretending to be sane. There she is, he said, voice carrying across the empty park. My wayward wife. Julie's body wanted to run. Muscle memory screamed at her to flee. But Armando's presence beside her was an anchor. Hello, Dominic, she said, and her voice only shook a little. Hello, Dominic laughed, the sound brittle and wrong. That's all you have to say? After everything you've done? After you humiliated me in front of the entire city? After I told the truth, you mean? Your truth. Dominic stepped closer, and Julie saw he was holding something, a gun, small and dark against his pale hand. Your twisted, ungrateful version of our marriage. I gave you everything. I saved you from poverty, from obscurity, from being nothing. You beat me, Julie said, each word a stone thrown. You terrorized me. You made me believe I deserved it. You did deserve it. You were never good enough, never smart enough, never... His eyes cut to Armando. And now you're sleeping with Mafia trash? My wife is a whore and a traitor. Armando moved, putting himself between Julie and Dominic. She was never your wife. She was your prisoner. There's a difference. Who the hell are you to lecture me? Dominic raised the gun, pointing it at Armando's chest. You think I'm afraid of you? You think your reputation means anything? I own this city. I own judges, politicians, police. I'm untouchable. You were untouchable, Armando corrected. Past tense. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Dominic's face twisted with confusion. What did you... I made a deal, Armando said calmly. Federal prosecutors. Full cooperation regarding your financial crimes in exchange for immunity on certain business activities of mine. Turns out, the government was very interested in your bribery network. You can't, I'll fight this. My lawyers will. Your lawyers can't help you anymore, Dominic. Neither can your money. Neither can your connections. Armando's voice dropped to something deadly. Because everyone you bought is more afraid of federal prison than they are loyal to you. Police cars appeared at the park entrance, lights flashing red and blue through the fog. Dominic's gun hand trembled. This isn't over. Even in prison, I have resources. I'll make sure. You'll make sure of nothing. Armando stepped closer, fearless despite the weapon, because if you even think about touching her again, if you send one message, make one threat, I will make you disappear in ways that don't involve lawyers or courts or anything civilized. Do you understand me? For the first time, Julie saw fear in Dominic's eyes. Real fear. The fear he'd spent 3 years cultivating in her. Dominic Blair. A federal agent called, approaching with handcuffs ready. Put the weapon down. Now. Dominic looked at Julie. At Armando. At the officers surrounding him. The gun fell from his hand. Officers swarmed him, forcing him to the ground, reading rights he probably wasn't hearing through the shock. Julie watched them cuff him. Watched them lift him to his feet. Watched them put him in a car that would take him somewhere he couldn't hurt anyone. Her knees buckled. Armando caught her, holding her as 3 years of terror finally broke free in shaking sobs. It's over, he murmured into her hair. It's over, Julie. He can't touch you now. She clung to him in the fog-soaked park, under the same dying street lamp where he'd first asked who hurt her. And for the first time in years, Julie believed she might actually be safe. 3 months later, Julie stood in front of 200 people and told her story. The ballroom was different from the one where Dominic had been arrested. Smaller, more intimate, filled with survivors rather than socialites. The banner behind her read, Voices Unsilenced. Domestic Violence Awareness Forum. Her hands shook as she gripped the podium. Public speaking had never been her strength. Dominic used to mock her for it, the way her voice would falter during dinner parties when he'd force her to speak. But this wasn't Dominic's world anymore. My name is Julie Morrison, she began, reclaiming the name she'd almost forgotten. And for 3 years, I was married to a man who nearly killed me. The room was silent. Listening, she told them about the escalation, the isolation, the way abuse disguised itself as love, the shame that kept her silent, the fear that kept her trapped. She told them about running. She didn't tell them about Armando. That part felt too complicated to explain. How a mafia boss had saved her when law enforcement couldn't. How darkness had protected her from darker things. Some truths weren't for public consumption. When she finished, the applause was thunderous. Women approached afterward with tears in their eyes, whispering thank you, telling their own stories, asking how she'd found the courage to leave. I didn't find courage, Julie told them honestly. I found survival. Courage came later. Dominic's trial had been swift and brutal. With Rebecca Chen's testimony, 2 other women coming forward, and the financial crimes too documented to deny, his lawyers had advised a plea deal. 20 years in federal prison. No possibility of parole for 15. Julie had attended the sentencing. She'd wanted to see his face when the judge read the verdict. Wanted to watch him understand that money couldn't buy his way out this time. He'd looked smaller in the prison jumpsuit. Older. Almost pathetic. When his eyes found hers across the courtroom, she didn't look away. Didn't flinch. Just stared back until he dropped his gaze first. Victory tasted quieter than she'd expected. Not triumphant. Just final. Armando had been distant since the arrest. Still protective. His men still watched her building. Still drove her to speaking engagements. Still made sure she was safe. But Armando himself appeared less frequently. A phone call every few days. A text checking in. But not the constant presence that had defined those first weeks. Julie told herself it was for the best. He'd saved her. She was grateful. But their worlds were fundamentally different. She was building a life in daylight while he operated in shadows. Eventually the calls became weekly, then bi-weekly, then they stopped altogether. Julie threw herself into advocacy work. She partnered with domestic violence organizations, spoke at schools and community centers, helped other women develop safety plans. She got a small apartment, nothing fancy, but hers, paid for with money she earned from a job she chose. She was rebuilding herself piece by piece. But some nights, when the apartment was quiet and loneliness crept in, she thought about Armando. About the way he'd looked at her in that park. The gentleness in hands that could kill. The grief in his eyes when he spoke about his sister. She'd Google his name sometimes, finding mentions in articles about organized crime. Always speculation, never proof. He existed in the margins of the legal world, untouchable in his own way. 6 months after Dominic's sentencing, Julie was offered a position with a national advocacy organization. Real salary, health insurance, the chance to help implement programs in multiple states. She accepted without hesitation. Her life was finally becoming something she recognized. Something she'd chosen. Something that felt like freedom instead of survival. But freedom, she discovered, could be lonely. The invitation came on a Thursday. Not a phone call, not a text, an actual paper invitation, delivered by a man in a suit who looked like he could break someone in half without breaking a sweat. You're invited to speak at a private fundraiser for women's shelters. Saturday, 7 p.m. Details enclosed. Transportation will be provided. No name, no return address. But Julie knew who sent it. She almost didn't go. Their worlds were separate now. She'd built something clean and legal and hers. Getting pulled back into Armando's orbit felt dangerous, not physically, but emotionally. But curiosity won. Saturday evening, a car arrived. Not one of Armando's usual vehicles, this was a regular sedan, driven by an older woman who smiled and made small talk about traffic. The venue was a restored theater in a neighborhood Julie didn't recognize. Inside, about 50 people milled around a mix of community leaders, nonprofit directors, and women who had the look of survivors. Julie gave her speech, talking about the importance of funding shelters, of creating safe spaces for women with nowhere else to go. The applause was warm, genuine. Afterward, during the reception, she searched the crowd for Armando. He wasn't there. Disappointment settled in her chest, sharp and unexpected. He couldn't stay, a voice said beside her. Julie turned to find an older woman with kind eyes and silver hair. I'm sorry? Armando. He organized this whole event, personally called every donor, secured the venue, arranged for your transportation. But he couldn't stay. The woman smiled. He said you deserved a world where you didn't need to see him to feel safe. I don't understand. He's been dismantling his operation for the past 6 months, severing ties with certain activities, transferring legitimate businesses to clean management, extracting himself from the family. The woman's eyes were knowing. It's not easy, leaving that life. It's dangerous, actually. A lot of people don't survive it. Julie's heart hammered. Why would he? Because he thinks you deserve better than a man with blood on his hands. Even if those hands saved you. The woman squeezed Julie's arm gently. He's trying to become someone who could exist in your daylight world. Whether you want him there or not is your choice. But he's trying. She walked away before Julie could respond. Julie stood in the center of the reception, surrounded by people congratulating her on her speech, and felt something shift in her chest. For 6 months, she'd been rebuilding herself, finding her voice, creating a life worth living. But maybe the life she was building had room for someone who'd walked through darkness to help her find light. Maybe redemption worked both ways. 8 months after Dominic's arrest, Julie spoke at a gala that felt worlds away from the one where her nightmare had ended. This event was hers, the launch of the Morrison Foundation. Named after the woman she'd been before, Dominic tried to erase her. The ballroom was filled with donors, survivors, advocates, people who believed in second chances and safe spaces. Julie wore a simple black dress and no jewelry except her mother's necklace. She'd learned that armor didn't need to be expensive. Sometimes it just needed to be yours. Her speech focused on the future, on programs being developed, shelters being funded, legal aid being offered. She talked about breaking cycles and building bridges and giving women the resources to save themselves. The applause when she finished felt like validation. Afterward, exhausted but satisfied, Julie slipped away from the reception. The gala was being held at a hotel adjacent to a small park, not the park where she'd met Armando, but similar enough to trigger memory. She found herself walking through it, heels in hand, letting the night air cool her flushed skin. The fog was light tonight. Street lamps glowed steadily instead of flickering. It felt peaceful instead of threatening. Julie sat on a bench, closing her eyes, letting herself feel the weight of how far she'd come. You give a good speech. Her eyes snapped open. Armando stood 3 feet away, hands in the pockets of dark slacks, wearing a simple button-down instead of his usual leather. The tattoos on his neck were still visible, but somehow they looked different, less threatening. Just part of who he was. He looked tired, older, but his eyes were the same, dark and intense and focused entirely on her. How long have you been standing there? Julie's heart was racing, long enough to hear the part about resilience. I liked that part. He didn't move closer, didn't assume permission, just waited. Julie studied him. His hair was shorter, his jaw clean-shaven. He looked like someone caught between 2 worlds, not quite belonging to either. You've been gone, she said, and hated how much it sounded like an accusation. I had things to handle, complicated things, dangerous things. Armando's voice was careful. I didn't want any of that touching you. I heard you've been leaving. The life, I mean. He nodded slowly. Trying to. It's not easy. Some ties are harder to cut than others. Some people don't want to let you go. Is it done? Mostly. Enough. He finally moved, sitting on the opposite end of the bench, close but not invading her space. I sold off the businesses I could, transferred others to people I trust, cut ties with family connections that were problematic. I'm not clean, Julie. I'll never be completely clean. But I'm cleaner than I was. Why? Armando looked at her like the answer should be obvious. Because you deserved better than what I was. Because the man who saved you in that park was built from violence, and I didn't want that to be the only version of me you knew. I'm not asking you to change for me. I'm not changing for you. I'm changing for me. You just made me want to. They sat in silence for a moment. Around them, the park breathed distant traffic, rustling leaves, the low hum of a city that never truly slept. I missed you, Julie said quietly. I missed you too, every day. But I needed to become someone who could stand in your world without bringing shadows. What if I don't mind the shadows? Armando turned to her, surprise flickering across his features. You've built something incredible, Julie. A foundation, a purpose, a life free from violence. Why would you want to complicate that? Because complicated doesn't mean bad. Julie shifted closer. You saved my life, Armando. Not just in that park, but every day after. You gave me space to heal. You helped me find my voice. You never asked for anything in return. I didn't save you for gratitude. I know. You saved me because you couldn't save her. Your sister. Julie reached out, taking his hand. His fingers were warm, calloused. Real. But I'm not her. I'm not your second chance at redemption. I'm just someone who survived because you helped me. And maybe someone who wants to know the man behind the protection. Armando stared at their joined hands. I've done terrible things. I've hurt people. I'm not asking for your confession. I'm not asking for perfection. Julie's voice was steady. I'm asking if you want to get coffee sometime. Maybe dinner. Maybe just see what happens when we're not running from something. You want to date a former Mafia boss? I want to date the man who caught me when I fell. The man who listened when I spoke. The man who made sure I didn't just survive, but lived. She squeezed his hand. Everything else is just details. A smile touched Armando's lips, genuine, soft, transforming his entire face. Coffee sounds good. Dinner sounds better. There are conditions, Julie warned. Of course there are. Complete honesty. If you're in danger, I need to know. If your past catches up with you, we handle it together. No more disappearing to protect me. Agreed. And you have to meet my therapist, because I have one now. And if this is going to work, you need to understand the work I'm doing. Armando nodded seriously. I can do that. And no criminal activity. None. If I'm building something legal and clean, I need you to be the same. That's non-negotiable. I'm already there. Or close enough. Julie studied his face, searching for deception. Found only sincerity and hope and something that looked like nervous anticipation. Okay then, she said. Coffee. Tomorrow? Tomorrow. Armando lifted her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles with a gentleness that made her heart ache. Thank you. For what? For giving a man like me a chance to be something better. Julie smiled. You were always something better. You just needed to believe it. They sat together on that bench as the fog cleared and the stars became visible, two people who'd found each other in darkness and chosen to walk toward light together. Not as savior and saved, not as damaged and healer. Just as two humans who'd survived their own hells and decided that maybe, just maybe, they deserved something gentle. When Armando finally walked Julie back to the gala, his hand never left hers. And for the first time since that terrible night in Dominic's kitchen, Julie felt something she'd almost forgotten existed. Hope for a future that wasn't defined by fear. A future she could choose. A future that included a man who'd learned to be gentle in a world that had taught him violence. The fog lifted completely as they reached the hotel. Dawn was still hours away, but Julie could already feel its promise. Thanks for sticking with this story till the end. If you enjoyed it, you're going to love the next one. It's packed with unexpected turns and heartfelt moments. Click the image on your screen to keep the journey going, and make sure to hit subscribe for more amazing stories. Drop a comment and rate this story from 1 to 10. I can't wait to see what you think.